Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode or another Q&A with BRStv. Brian, and I've got my buddy Kyle here. He's missing hockey practice to be here, so very important you guys send in some tough questions for him. We're gonna be sitting here probably for the next 45 minutes to an hour, whatever it's gonna be. Just firing your questions, any general reefing questions, saltwater aquariums, whatever you got. If you wanna ask Kyle some personal questions, that's also fine. We had some of that last week. You can avoid those with me, I'd appreciate it. But yeah, fire away, ask as many as you can, put them in the comments, and we'll rapid fire and try to get through as many as possible. All right?
Yeah, try to stump me.
Try to stump Kyle. Yeah, because if I don't know, Kyle probably does. Then if Kyle doesn't know,
Game over.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to go.
We'll follow up later.
That's right. All right, let's get right into it here. We've got a few from last week, so we'll go through and touch on a couple of these. So Kyle, why don't you go ahead and kick us off? Take the first one.
Well, last week we ended with Gavin Jones having a question. He wants to know what our thoughts are on ammonia dosing in an established reef tank. Is that something you've done before?
No, I've never dosed ammonia in an established reef tank.
Neither have I.
Okay.
But
what are your thoughts on it?
I've heard some anecdotal evidence that ammonia is like a better usage of nitrate or nitrogen for corals. It's easier to absorb than nitrates are. So it's something that I've wanted to do. I just have not pulled the trigger on dosing it personally yet. Yeah,
so everything's just anecdotal evidence at this point.
Yeah.
But I mean, if there is some good documentation out there, I'd be interested in seeing it. But yeah, it makes sense.
Maybe a future investigates. Maybe.
Yeah, that would actually be a kind of neat thing for us to take a look at one day and do some comparisons of that. But I don't personally have any experience with it, so good. Thanks, Gavin. All right, going to Chris Lessard. So best method for bubble algae. That is on the rock work. So good news, Thomas did an episode of Help I Wreck My Tank where he talked about how to deal with Valonia. It's a pain and it can be a real challenge, especially if it's pretty advanced in its takeover of the aquarium. But there is hope. A lot of it's manual removal, finding some creatures that'll help pick off that algae. So like Mithrax crabs, some fish will help out with that, but a lot of it is trying to remove clusters. But anytime you remove some, you leave that rhizome in place, and that's just going to end up growing more. So try to get them off in as many clusters as you can, but hit it now. Don't let it go. Don't be like, oh, I'll wait and hit it. When it really gets bad. If you see one, just try to get rid of it. If you don't like it, get rid of it because they'll just keep showing up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's one of those things that I don't think any tank's ever going to fully get rid of once it's there.
Yep.
But if you nip it in the bud, well, it's still just like one or two bubbles that you see. Way easier to deal with than 6 months later when it's the entire tank full of bubbles.
Yeah, and I've seen that where you've got some old, even mature tanks that have like just a couple like massive, ping pong ball size almost bubbles, but there aren't any others in the entire tank. So, but we know that popping them doesn't spread more or anything like that. They're just going to do that on their own. So. But yeah, get started on it as soon as possible. Try to beat it back.
You're the best herbivore in the tank. That's all I got to say.
You're the best herbivore in the tank. I love it. All right. New tank this summer will be my first time with corals. Do you recommend starting out with caulk or two-part? They both have their pros and cons for starting out. I mean, honestly, when you're in the hobby for a while, for me, it's like now caulk is easier, but I think when I began, two-part was easier. It was just easier, I think, to wrap my head around when I first started getting into the hobby. That'd be my vote. So I don't know why. I think now, looking back, I'm like, oh, there's nothing to caulk, but I think it's just this mental barrier that some folks have. But
I could go either way. There is the easy approach with kalkwaster that I like, where you just put it in your ATO. Super easy. Only drawback is you're going to run through ATO pumps like crazy because kalkwaster is pretty basic and is going to wreak havoc on your pumps. So just be ready for that. But I think two-part is better for beginners in the sense that you become more in tune with your tank because you're testing your alkalinity and calcium more frequently, and then you're getting a better sense of how much your corals are consuming. So I think it's good for just learning how to get in tune with your tanks, what low alkalinity does to your corals and what they look like in those cases, and vice versa. So
that's a great point. It does keep you sort of focused in on what's going on in your tank, paying attention to it with the regular testing, and then adjusting how much of those different parts you're putting in, right? So I think that's a great point. Yeah. So that would be my take on it. Two-part for me would be easier for a beginner. All right. Got some coming in for today, so let's go ahead and jump down to a couple of these here. Alec, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Says, what do you guys think about Nios Pure Salt? What do you think about Nios Pure Salt, Kyle?
I like it a lot. It's
Yeah.
a really good, clean mixing salt. It mixes up super fast in my experience, and it's super, super consistent. Honestly, when we got that here at BRS for the first time, pretty recent, I think it was within the last year and a half, I was super excited for it. I got one of the first buckets. Loved it. Haven't switched back yet.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing I keep hearing about it. I don't have a lot of experience using it personally, but it's just that it mixes so clean. That's the biggest part I keep hearing about it. So, which is a big bonus. So,
yeah, I love it.
Great.
Comes in a box or the bucket. So if you like buckets still, great option.
yeah, and I'm a fan of the buckets. I think it's a little bit better for moisture control personally, and just easier to store a bucket somewhere, and you have a bucket at the end. So
Who doesn't need 65-gallon buckets?
that's
at their
right.
house?
As a reefer, if you've got one tank, maybe you're just not there yet. But if you start getting multiple tanks, for some reason you just can't ever have enough clean buckets sitting around. So, all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kyle. You want to do the next one?
Yeah, looks like Mohammed chimed in with a question. Thanks for tuning in and asking a question. What do you think about dripping water changing method for Red Sea 425 XL? I'm assuming that's going to be in line with like an automatic water change almost. I'm not familiar with a dripping water change method personally.
I'm not either. I'm assuming that's the same thing. It's just as a little bit evaporates, you're just
Yeah. I think automatic water changes are small, more frequent water changes are great, especially if you have a limited mixing area that you can use. So if you don't have room to do a full 20% water change all in one go, doing it a little bit more frequently is perfectly acceptable for any size tank, personally.
Yeah, I like the automatic water changing. I think it's pretty useful.
Make sure it does do the water change. So
Yeah. I mean, that's me. Like I'll forget, or I just I'll skip a week or whatever because I get busy or something happens. So being able to set it and forget it is pretty handy for me. If there is, Mohammed, if there is a dripping water changing method that we're not familiar with, obviously, feel free to comment on that and let us know, inform us, and we'll look that up and make sure that we get in tune. Okay. Rajendra. Rajendra, you think that dosing Fido in a tank before corals for trying to encourage pods growth can be overdone?
you're the pod guy.
I love pods. Pods are great. So do I think dosing Phyto in a tank before corals for trying to encourage pod growth can be overdone? I don't know, probably. You're adding, nutrient to the water potentially that you don't really need to do. I mean, I don't think you're going to hurt anything, honestly. I don't think it's going to cause any problems. I just don't necessarily think it's necessary. So I don't think there's really any reason for it. Pods will eat a lot of stuff.
That's true.
You can throw just about anything in there, even if it's just plain old fish food flakes. They'll find a way around it, and they'll just eat whatever you throw in there. They don't care, as long as there's for some of the larger amphipods, things like that. There's some larger chunks of food, and then there's algae growing on the rocks, things like that. You're pretty much keeping everybody satisfied. So I don't really think it's necessary. Are you going to hurt it? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it.
No.
I personally wouldn't go too overboard with Fido in the beginning just because the pods are the only thing that's going to eat it.
Yeah.
The pods are going to eat a lot of the ugly phase, so your diatoms in the early stage of a tank, any extra food that you're adding to the tank for your fish, once you get fish in the tank, and just detritus in general. So
Yeah, I think if anything,
open food chain for them.
Yeah, I think if anything, just throwing the Fido in there is almost a waste of money.
Yeah.
A waste of time and money. I just wouldn't do it.
You get a better bang for your buck if you're dosing Fido with corals, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because corals will take care of it too.
Yep, there you go. Alex back. Thanks, Alec. He says, what are the dosing water change methods that you guys run personally? So I do a little bit of everything. So I do have some tanks set up on automatic water changes. For me, I like doing that on my smaller tanks. For some reason, I think there's value in doing both. I just haven't gone to the step of adding them to my larger tanks, mainly because I don't want to have a big reservoir with saltwater, but like a 5-gallon bucket for like a 20-gallon tank, a 5-gallon bucket of premixed saltwater will last about a week and a half or so, and it's just super easy. And then, like we said, we know it's getting done, all that. But for my larger tanks, I tend to like to get in there and clear off the rocks a little bit and try to siphon out
little
some
elbow grease.
Yeah, siphon out some detritus, get the sump, clean that out a little bit. So I tend to like to do that a little manually. But not for everybody. I know some people that have very, very great large systems that they do automatic water changes on, and they look fantastic. So
Yeah, can't argue with those results.
Yeah.
For me personally, I am doing a mix. So my tank here at the office is a Reefer 300 XL. On that, I'm doing monthly 30% water changes. I just go big, just do it all at once.
Yep.
And I'm dosing all for Reef daily for that tank. So
Yeah. That was a good point. So when I do manual water changes, I do a big volume. I don't do like 10%. I do, 20, 30, or if it's been a while, I'll even do a 40%. I don't care. So I'll do usually a larger water volume less frequently. So.
Yeah, and I'm keeping it simple with all for Reef. Just covers all my elements all in one package without having to have multiple containers, multiple dosing heads. That tank's just more simplistic in build. For my nano tank, it is also just regular manual water changes, and then I am not dosing anything there because it's just soft corals at home. So,
yep,
keeping it simple at home when I'm not here.
Yeah, perfect. I agree. Jerry Pileman. I calibrated my refractometer, my Neptune Apex, and my Henna probe, and they all read 35 ppm. The Tropic Marin hydrometer reads 30. Should I trust then it cuts off, but I'm assuming he's saying, should I trust the hydrometer? And the answer is?
I would measure a known solution. So when you're trying to compare different devices, don't test compared to your tank water, because we're testing our tank water because we don't know what it is. We're testing a variable. So anytime you're trying to reference or compare different test kits, so your refractometer compared to your Neptune Apex probe, you want to have them both testing the same solution that you know is at a specific level. So
yeah, I assume because he's saying he calibrated those three, the Apex, the Henna probe, and his refractometer, and they all read the same. So I'm assuming when you calibrated, like Kyle said here, that if you're calibrating, make sure you're using a standard solution that has that fixed.
Well, even when you're even when you're testing though, not just the calibration part, but if you're gonna use say this is gonna apply to salinity as well as alkalinity or any other parameter you're testing. If you're comparing your Trident, for example, to your Hanna checker to a Saltwater test kit, you don't want to compare them all to your tank because there's gonna be some variation because we're testing an unknown solution to get the number.
Correct.
You want to test all three of those devices against a known standard. So you want to have a standard that you know is 8.5 DKH for your testing, and then see how close the devices are to the 8.5 reading. So
Correct.
Same process applies here with your salinity devices. You want to test them all to a known solution that you know the number is 35 parts per million for all of the devices, and then see where they all fall. So don't go based on just the calibration part itself.
Right, which would be hard though with the hydrometer, right?
You need a bigger solution.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of standard solution to do a hydrometer, but.
I think if you have a scale handy, I believe Randy Holmes Farley has a method to make a larger volume of a calibration solution that should be 35 parts per million.
Yeah.
Or 1,000, sorry.
Sure. In general though, just as my personal experience, when it comes to having things like the refractometer, salinity probes, things like that, I would almost always trust, as long as they're properly calibrated, I would almost always trust that reading over a hydrometer reading, personally. That's me.
I mean, the Tropic Marin one is pretty nice. It's one of those floating hydrometers. It's pretty accurate. It's better than the swing arm ones.
Yeah, the swing arm ones for sure. Don't trust those. Okay.
Good question, though.
Yeah, great question.
Let's see. It looks like next question I'm seeing is from Dylan. He's asking, why am I constantly having to dose 10 times more alkalinity than calcium in my 120-gallon mixed reef? Basement and CO2 are my only guesses. Guess hydrometer the most. So my initial thought here is you probably have some precipitation. So I would be checking your heaters, your pumps, and your skimmer, your return pump, or any other pumps that generate a little bit of heat. If you're seeing any scaling buildup, that's going to be a sign that you have precipitation in the tank. That generally leads to having to dose more of your two-part additives, especially alkalinity, because that'll precipitate out of solution. So I would check that before you make any huge adjustments first. So that's where I would start. Do you have any advice for someone dosing this much more alkalinity compared to calcium?
No, nothing more than that. I think that's a good spot to start at. And go from there and see what you come up with. But yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, great question. Okay, Chris Schwartz. My LFS tested my Reef tank on the aqua spin, and my phosphates were different both times, reading 0.7 at one and 0.4 at the other. So I went and tested with my Hanna ultra low, and I got 0.18.
This is pretty related to the salinity question that we just did.
It's kind of related to that, right? So it's really hard to know what's correct if you're not testing against the solution. So best thing that you can do is, you want to think that your LFS has everything calibrated properly, but you don't know for sure. So the best you can do is you've got a Hanna checker, so make sure you've got some of the calibration fluid for that, and do that test on there and make sure that it's coming in right where you want it. And if it does, if it comes in line with that standard, then I would probably just trust that over what your LFS is getting. If they differ significantly, at the same time, then I would probably ask your LFS if they ever calibrate. I mean, it's kind of, they may not be super friendly about it, but they should be. So, maybe ask them if they calibrated that recently, and because you're getting very different readings. Yeah,
or see if they have a different test kit that they can use when you're there. They might have a spare Hanna checker that they use for their own tanks.
Yep. So, and with that kind of a difference too for your sanity, I mean, you could probably get a titration kit and see which it's closer to. I mean,
Saltwater would be a quick and dirty.
Yeah, at that difference, at that sort of range, you should see a difference between it and know which one you're closer to. So, just to check your sanity. All right, Millsy boy. My nitrates are high, but my phosphate low. How do I tackle that? My nitrates are high, but my phosphates are low. How do I tackle that? Well, you could, there are a few things. The easiest thing is you could, feed, or add, or, start feeding more with some phosphate-rich foods. That's an easy one to start bumping that up if you're trying to get that up a little bit. You can also dose, some phosphates. That's both options if you're trying to get that. If you've got something that's just pulling it out of the water quickly, you may just have to dose to counteract that, or remove whatever's yanking it out so quick.
Like if you have GFO, I would cut back on the GFO.
Stop using that.
It'll get back in balance. Then you can do water changes to kind of bring them both down in equilibrium. Or anything like that. And like you said, changing up the mix of foods that you're feeding. So you're feeding phosphate heavy foods compared to nitrate heavy foods, just to kind of rebalance everything. So both are high or low at the same time.
Yeah, and I suppose it depends too on what we're looking at as the problem here. Is the problem because your nitrates are high and your phosphate, or is it because you're that's the problem? Depends on what you want, right? So and high is relative depending on who you talk to. But if you're trying to get your phosphates up, feed foods that have a richer or higher level of phosphates in them. Stop using GFO. Trying to get your nitrates down, cut back on feeding, things like that. So.
Chris Schwartz has another question asking, what is the most accurate way of testing? That is kind of a trick question because we are in a hobby with hobby grade testing devices. So if you want the best of the best, you're going to have to get $5,000 lab grade testers for a lot of these parameters, especially for seawater.
Which is totally reasonable for the average hobbyist. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Just go out to Home Depot, probably has them.
Yeah, Home Depot. Yeah. Lowe's. No, I'm just kidding.
So go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought there. But
I was just going to say, get a test kit that you are able to calibrate so you can verify if it's reading accurately or within reason. And always, if you get an erratic reading, don't necessarily act on any weird erratic reading right away. I would recommend getting a second set of eyes or having a second test kit on hand just in case, just to fact check it, or have a buddy that uses a different test kit. Just get a second set of eyes if something's looking weird. But anything that you can calibrate is going to be my personal opinion the best option.
Anything, probes, spectrometers, refractometers, any of those are going to be probably what I would recommend as best choice. If you really want to know, if you want to get down, I want to know everything for sure, send in your water for an ICP test or something. That'll dial you in real quick on what's going on in there.
Yeah, and I guess I also want to throw out, because you brought up probes, depends on the parameter you're testing too. In my opinion, anything that you're doing with pH should be done by a probe, because anytime you're removing that sample of water from the tank, adding a titrant to get a color reading, you're affecting the pH of the sample anyways. So the sample test might say 7.8, but your tank might actually be closer to 8, 8.1.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that little bit of a difference, it really doesn't take much to swing that.
Yeah, 10 milliliters of water changes pH pretty quick.
Yep. So there you go, Chris. If you just joined us, guys, we're doing a Q&A. Brian and Kyle here from BRS. If you've got any questions about saltwater tanks, or you're just personal questions for Kyle, if he's single or likes long walks on the beach, whatever, you can ask those. But
yes and yes.
There you go, ladies. Yes and yes. Man, we're going to end up blowing up with questions here.
Yeah.
So, no. So if you're joining us, firing your questions, we'll get to them as best we can here. We're going to try to rapid fire a few of them here because we are getting stacked up here. This is great, guys. Keep them coming. All right. So Jessica Luschner, I hope I said that right. I have a 120-gallon and need to plumb a UV sterilizer to help with ick. I've got the ick-sensitive fish out in quarantine, but I'm wondering how long I have the sterilizer up and running before I put the tanks back.
Honestly, once you get the UV sterilizer up, I think you're good to add them in because the UV sterilizer is going to start working as soon as it's up and running, turned on. So.
Yep. As long as your tangs are ick-free and you're quarantined, they're looking good, you should be able to add those back in as soon as you get that UV sterilizer going. It's gonna take care of anything floating around in the water. So, good to go.
Good question.
Master Tanver. My tank is 220 liters. Come on, man. 58 gallons. I'm just kidding. All right.
Metric.
Yeah. I actually prefer metric. So my tank is about 4 months old after introducing fish. What's the maximum volume of water change for regular basis? The maximum volume of water change for regular basis? I mean, really, once you've got your system established and you've got all that beneficial bacteria going on in there, is there a maximum?
I don't think so.
No.
You can change 100% if you really wanted to, as long as you're getting all the parameters matched up between those water changes.
Yeah, and you're not leaving your poor fish like flopping on the sand bed.
Yeah.
So, bad idea. But there's really not. I would never personally change out all of the water at once, but I have gone down. I have done up to like an 80.
Yeah,
80,
it
like
depends on what's going on. But
if I have a problem, like something,
if you overdosed your alkalinity by mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Or I've had a cucumber, a sea cucumber, or something like get caught up in a power head or something like that, and you're just pull out like 80% of the water and replace it. You're going to be fine. I mean, it's going to reach that like sort of equilibrium pretty quickly. So
yeah, but for regular basis, if you're doing a weekly water change, I'd recommend 10 to 20%.
Yep.
Generally speaking, is what I aim for in those situations.
There you go. Roblox?
Roblox? I think that's what that
I think that's what it is. So thank you, Roblox. Can you keep different types of anemones in one tank? Sure. Yeah.
Depends. My experience personally
Sure.
has not been good. With that.
Well, so I don't like keeping anemones anyway, usually. I've just never had a lot of luck. It's mixed. I've had some that do really well, but then others, they're just a pain. Now, once you get them established,
they're fine.
They're great. I mean, they're almost bulletproof once they're established, but it's a whole getting them established process. So, I don't know. You had bad luck?
I did.
Okay.
My very first tank when I got in the hobby, the guy gave me a whole setup. It was already filled with water, had fish, had anemones, had corals. He had a mix of anemones, so I had a Hedone carpet, a long tentacle, and I think 4 bubble tips.
Yeah.
All of the anemones just nonstop walked. None of them would settle down.
Never settled down.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
based on that experience, I don't think I would mix them, just
Right.
because I've heard there's some chemical warfare that can happen between the species.
Sure, I can see that.
So
I've seen carpets, rocks, and bubble tips all in the same tank. Now, these were larger tanks, so they had plenty of room to maybe establish, but I have seen them before, so I know you can.
I personally wouldn't, but
I probably wouldn't either, but then again, I'm probably not going to go grabbing a bunch of anemones anyway. But
yeah, that'd be a species-only tank.
the
for me if
Hedones
I was doing them.
The Hedones are awesome. I love carpet anemones, though. You get a
They're
nice
beautiful.
tank with a beautiful carpet anemone in it. Really good stuff. You want to do one?
Yeah, I like Ryan's question.
Ryan Bramley.
Yeah, he asked, what corals would you pick for a 10-gallon tank? So there's a lot of corals that you can do in a 10-gallon tank. I don't think you're limited based on it being 10 gallons. It just depends on what kind of lighting you're doing and what you're ready to do as far as maintenance and staying on top of things. So you can do everything from softies to LPS to even SPS and acros. One of my favorite tanks, probably like 6-7 years ago, was a 10-gallon Innovative Marine Nuvo, SPS acro dominated. Guy had 4 AI primes on it to light it, which I thought was insane. But really cool to see that setup. So you're not limited by size, just depends on how much you want to put in for maintenance, routine, dosing. If you're ready to be a little bit more hands-on, you can definitely do the acros and SPS, no problem. But if you want to make it easy, simple, I would just stick with some softies and LPS just to make sure maintenance is super easy.
Sorry, this is Jolene. She's down here whining, so I just thought I'd pick her up. Everybody, Jolene, the world, say hello.
She likes the attention.
She does like the attention, and she doesn't like not getting it. So we're going to let her sit here for a second. All right. So, that's kind of where I'm at, too. Just It kind of depends on what you want. I don't like certain, so a lot of people are tempted to always, like they get like one of those, especially if it's a starter tank, some of those corals, you're really loud, some of those corals, like leather corals, things like that, are easy to keep, but they grow and they get so big, and then as you start to trim them back, they just don't look great. So I like usually things that have more of like a polyp-based colony, things like that for smaller tanks, clove polyps, star polyps, things like that. Zoanthids, because you can trim those back and you're not really, it doesn't look ugly afterwards. So even acros or montiporas to an extent, you can do that with. So, but for some reason, like big beautiful leather corals, when you start slicing them up with a razor blade or scissors or whatever.
Well, yeah, they're not looking like a toadstool anymore.
Yeah, they don't look great anymore, but so that's just something to keep in mind. Okay. G. Williams. Stocking ideas. That makes me look old, doesn't it?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, thanks.
Fresh out of college.
Fresh, yep. I'm 27. No. So stocking ideas for 26 Red Sea Peninsula. Gosh, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot you could do.
There's a lot.
I mean, it really just depends on what you like, right? A 26 gallon, that's plenty for a nice little, cool little mixed reef.
Yeah.
If it was me personally, that's probably what I would do. I would do a nice mixed reef, probably more softy, like zoanthids, maybe a few branching corals of some kind in there. But maybe euphilia. I like to have plenty of space for euphilias. Yeah. But then if it was me personally, I would stick with just a lot of small, reclusive, very cool fish. That's just gonna increase that interest, that intrigue when you go up to the tank and you look at it and there are fish in there. Maybe you don't see them, so you have to spend some time searching for them. And you'll love it more than anybody else will, because they're like, where are all the fish? You're like, oh, there's like 10 fish in there, but they can't see them, but you do. So.
It's like, where's Waldo?
Yeah.
But for your fish.
That's probably what I would do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ideas. I think just because I have too many tank ideas in my head, I don't know where I would go personally.
Right.
Just for a general answer to someone asking me what they would do, I would go mixed reef as well. If you're looking for some fish ideas that are a little bit more unique, a little bit more out of the normal, possum wrasses are my all-time favorite.
Oh, I love possum
They're
wrasses,
super tiny.
Possum with a cryptic wrasse is cool too.
Yeah, those, I was going to say the pink streaked wrasse, not the 6-line, the pink streak. Those are a little bit harder to come by, but they're super peaceful, super cool. Small, super unique, and I would never have a nano tank without a tail spot blenny. My hands down favorite personality fish.
Great little fish. I also, you don't see them as up, but there's a red-headed gobies.
Yeah.
Love those guys. Even the green striped green banded gobies. And then any kind, goby. Obviously, I guess we like gobies. Goby and wrasses. Goby shrimp combo.
Oh,
pistol shrimp. I mean, that's a no. So lots of really cool little fish that you could throw in there.
Yeah. I mean, if you got the money, candy basslet also. Love them.
Yeah, candy basslet. Maybe some sexy shrimp.
As long as you don't have the basslet might eat those.
The basslet might,
Just be careful with that. But
all right,
a lot of great options for a small tank.
Yep. Okay, so this looks like it's going to be an interesting one.
Good luck.
But it's been moved up the list. So that's interesting. So it says, I asked someone once, Triggerfish45, and thank you, Triggerfish45. I don't know where this is going. I asked someone once, what if fish had nipples? This has been put on my list, so I'm reading it. And they said, then they'd be mammals. But whales are mammals, and they don't have nipples. What's your opinion? Well, whales, it's actually, whales are actually mammals, and there are lots of, and they do produce milk, right? They have mammary glands, they produce milk because their calves will feed off the milk, but they don't technically have nipples. They have like it's like a little slit. It's like a mammary slit is what it's called, right? And that's what they feed out of. It's weird, right? But a lot of milk drinking mammals. There's other species of milk drinking animals that don't have nipples either, like echidnas. Things like that. They just lick milk off of the mother's fur and things like that. So whales are a weird exception to the rule there in the world of your typical mammals. So
evolutionary
placental
differences.
mammals, placentals versus monotremes versus marsupials and all that.
Yeah.
So, interesting. Great whale question for all those out there. Whales,
marine biology,
do not have nipples. All right.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. All right. Orca whale 18. Sorry.
How fitting. Orca whale. After
Orca
talking about
whale, yeah.
whales.
So it's like you guys know what you're doing here or something. Okay, so thank you. I want to thank the moderator for us right now because that was a fun question. Okay, I'll jump in here real quick. If you're just joining us, Q&A time, send in your questions. Kyle and I are going to answer them. I probably can't, but Kyle will. Okay, so what would be a reason for diatoms on sand despite detectable nitrates and phosphate and zero silicate?
This is going to go one of two ways. Your silicates are either being consumed at the same rate they're being put in by the diatoms, or it is possible that you have a form of dinos instead of diatoms. There's a kind that looks very, very, very similar to diatoms, but it is in the sand bed, lights out, doesn't kill it, UV is not going to kill it. It's one of those more difficult ones, and they actually, what I've seen is people dose silicates to actually promote diatom growth to outcompete the dino. So I would get a microscope if you have one handy or have a friend that has one, then you can get a confirmation on the ID. If you do find out that they are diatoms, I would get some copepods because copepods will put a dent in that really
just
quick.
hammer them down, yeah.
Or beef up your cleanup crew a little bit.
Yeah, just...
Diatoms are easy once you know it's diatoms.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to go with an easy, fail-safe, I guess, effort, you can always add pods. I mean, because there's something in your tank. Your tank's going to benefit somehow if you're not sure how many you have. So you can always add those in, see how that goes. But yeah, make sure, look up, make sure that they are in fact diatoms and not dinos, because then there's a totally different way to attack them. But yeah, I like your first point. It can be a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They're dying, and the other ones are taking up the silicon.
Exactly.
Yeah, so.
I think Jonathan Tucker is next. Do you put music on when you do a water change? If so, what's your go-to? Do you follow a schedule still, or do you just do water changes as needed in the stage of your journey?
So that's a great question, Jonathan. So do I put music on when I do a water change? Typically, I'm going to go with a Marvin Gaye or something like that, right? Something really classy. Yeah.
Seduces the fish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Really lull them to sleep. Barry White.
Yeah.
A good one. Yeah. So, All right. So no, I don't typically do that, but I like where your head's at. You do you, man. Do I follow a schedule still, or do I do water changes as needed in this stage? So pretty much, if I'm doing an auto water change, that's one reason I like them, because then I can put it on a schedule and I know it's getting water changes. Because I know myself, I will just skip them. Like I'm like, I'll do that next week. So a lot of times I just kind of one day decide, I'm like, it's time for a water change here. Or, I look at it, I'm like, I can see some detritus building up and things like that, and I'll just decide it's this week I'm going to do a water change. So yeah, admittedly, I'm not the best at scheduling those out.
I am a little lax. I tell myself I'm going to do it every week,
Yep.
but ends up being more like every other week.
Yeah.
So it's...
Then I have done it. I've had a tank before that I've, went on an experiment, and I just never changed the water, ever. So, and it ran for like 6 years and grew beautiful SPS in it. So, but that was quite a bit of time ago. So I'm sure it was depleted in some things, but.
Yeah, but I do put some music on, and it depends on what I'm in the mood to listen to.
Right.
Depends on what's new. I usually listen to kind of like new album releases when they're out. So kind of just depends on what the vibe is for that week, personally.
I always like to throw on some.
A little Celine Dion, a little Cher.
Sure, okay.
Sometimes it depends on the day.
I can see that. I like throwing some trash TV in the background usually, like something that I'd be embarrassed to tell the people out there that I actually watch. So.
I listen to ASMR sometimes too.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Jonathan. Nick, what foods generally increase nitrates more than phosphates?
Generally going to be your frozen foods. They're going to be a little bit higher than those nitrates compared to phosphates in my experience. Phosphates typically come from a lot of those dried out foods. So if you're doing a lot of freeze-dried, flake or pellet foods tend to be a little bit higher in phosphates in my experience. And the one exception to the frozen food would be mysis shrimp, like PE specifically, because it's got a little bit extra stuff in there. So I found that's a little bit higher in phosphates than other things, but generally speaking, frozen foods are more nitrate forward than.
Yeah, and when I do use mysis, I try to rinse it. I've just gotten in the habit of rinsing it out because I find very few fish that won't take to it to some degree. So it's great food. It's really high nutrient level, but yeah, I typically rinse it out. I get that sort of funk that it's frozen in out. That matrix. Then
you take a shot of it after, right?
I do. Well, waste not, want not. But I find that typically helps a little bit with messing with it too much. So, Okay, man, look at all these questions. These are great. I'm loving this.
Yeah.
Okay. Arbor Press, how significant does 20 PSI on my BRS RODI system affect the quality of my output water? My TDS reads 0. Does this mean I don't need a booster pump then? No, it does not mean that. So if your input water is only at 20 PSI, what's going on is you're not optimizing the RODI unit to its full potential, right? So you're wasting a lot more water than you need to. Now, if you're someplace where you just don't care about that, I guess it's fine. I would recommend getting a booster pump because you're going to end up with a lot less wastewater and a lot more product.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly if they mean they have 20 PSI here or if they're insinuating the difference between 40 PSI and 60 PSI. I'm not sure.
I was wondering that stuff. I answered it as far as like they're getting 20 PSI, which is really low water pressure. I feel sorry for you when you take a shower.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about a difference, so like 40 to 60, still
Big
same
difference.
thing, huge difference. Or 70 to 90, again, huge difference, right? So
yeah, but less return once you're over that 65 PSI in my experience.
yeah. So once you get over 60 PSI, you're 60 to 80 is really where you want your RODI unit pumping at. If you get above 90, it can cause damage as well. So just thought there. So I actually recently did a video on this. I did a booster pump video that should be hopefully coming out soon. Tune into that. But no, if you're just talking about getting 20 PSI, you definitely need a booster pump. If you're talking about 40 to 60, it can have a big effect if you're under that 60 mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in my opinion, if you're at 65 is like my goal for any system. If I'm below that, I always add a booster pump, mostly because you need at least 50 PSI for your auto shutoff valve to work. If you're below that, it's gonna be very iffy on that diaphragm triggering. But if you're also below that, you're losing efficiency and wasting way more water than you need to.
Ton. Yeah.
So save some money, get the booster pump if you're below 65 PSI.
100% agree. Okay, Ryan Bramley. What is the best way to deal with salt creep? Patience and just manual removal.
Yeah, you just got to keep on top of cleaning.
Yeah, you just got to stay on top of it. And you can help yourself out, like if you've got an air stone in there or someplace where bubbles are
take the air stone out.
take that out. Or if you're, if you're getting in a certain area, it's usually where bubbles or something are popping and hitting the surface especially, right? Or where there's a little bit of water trimming that you get these little splashes every now and then. Best solution is to try to mitigate that by removing those things or getting them away from the very edge of the aquarium if you can, or the sump or whatever it is. But most part, this is a saltwater tank. It's going to generate salt creep. It just is.
Yeah.
So
just something that you have to do. I usually do it weekly. Just give it a little wipe down around the tank.
Yep.
Especially those tanks that are a little bit more splashy. If you have an overflow box,
Yeah.
if you got too much flow ripping through the drain pipe, you're going to get a lot of splashing.
Yep.
So,
and water, water's going to creep because of capillary action. So it's going to sit there and and flow. As soon as it touches something, it's going to climb up it, and keep going, and then more water is going to follow it, and then it's going to dry out and create salt. So, or leave the salt residue behind. So you're going to get it anytime something is inside your tank and like coming outside your tank on a hose or anything like that. You're going to get it. So just keep up on it. Fire away.
David P. Can I dose a combination of All for Reef and Moonshiner's method? I'm not fully versed on the Moonshiner's method. The little bit I do know is that it does involve a lot of ICP testing, and I think it's predominantly just the trace elements. So I don't think there's an issue dosing the two in combination. But generally speaking, I don't think you'll need to worry about trace elements if you're dosing All for Reef, because All for Reef is already going to maintain it. The Moonshiners would only get you the adjustment you need. So you're almost just ICP testing to adjust specific parameters rather than doing the full Moonshiner's method if you're using All for Reef.
Yeah. I think you're kind of just doubling down for no reason. Probably wasting a little bit of money on the All for Reef, where you could just do if you do the Moonshiners, you could just double that up with like caulk or something and call it a day. Most likely, right?
I should do some more digging in the Moonshiner's method. I've been intrigued, but
I have too. I thought about starting up a tank just to give it a whirl because I haven't gotten into it yet, and it's sort of a new thing, but.
It's tickling my sciencey chemistry.
Yeah, it's super intriguing, and I dig it because you're really getting into the nitty gritty and the details about what's going on with your water chemistry, because that's a no lie system, right? ICP, it's going to tell you exactly what's in there. So really intriguing. But I think if you're doing both, and if somebody else in the comments can answer that question for David, fire away. But I imagine you're probably doubling down for no reason. Chris Van, thanks for the question, guys. Tank question on square tank versus rectangular or rectangle. I have an Innovative Marine 112 gallon that is 36 inches by 36 inches, 20 inches tall. Is that going to be okay for a yellow and a blue tang? I mean,
hotly debatable.
Debatable, right? Yeah, I mean, they'll be fine in there. They probably will live perfectly fine. For me, 36 inches is sort of my threshold where I say just don't put a tang in there. I'm usually like, try to get 4 feet at least out of a tank before you start throwing at least a bunch of tangs in there. I don't know. It's debatable. The whole tang debate, can go on forever, I think. But,
yeah. I will say that your 36 by 36 is better than a 40 breeder 36-inch tank.
Yeah,
so,
at least it's deep, so they've got the ability to sit there and do loops. And tangs are, they're just going to swim. You've got plenty of space there because you've got that nice big cube, so should be okay. But again, I'm sure there are people out there that would say no. I say that you're right in that area where it's probably okay, but
you're gonna get yes and no from depending on
everybody.
Who you
Yeah,
ask, so. I would personally be okay with a couple tangs in there and just keep an eye on and see how big they get. If they get too big for my comfort, I'd either plan on upgrading or have someone that has a bigger tank than me.
Yeah, I'd say because you've got that depth, you're probably okay. But
yeah.
If you were doing a standard size 3-foot tank, I'd say no, but yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think Aqua Clown is up next. I see. Is it possible to have a tank with a bubble tip anemone and RFA? It's a 20-gallon.
Rock flower anemone?
Yeah, rock flower.
Again, we sort of had this exact same question earlier, right? Can you have different anemones in the same tank? It kind of depends, right? I mean, I'd say if one is already established, that might be easier too. If one's already established, adding a different species might be okay. The rock flowers, they're beautiful. I love them. But I don't know. I've usually had pretty good luck with those. Again, I've seen people that have luck with multiple species.
I personally haven't.
You mentioned earlier that you do not.
I don't plan on trying it again. I am a huge species only with anemones just because they walk around, they're singing my corals.
Yeah, that's exactly. Typically that's a good point. If I do have anemones, I'm not going to put them in a really coral heavy tank either because then they're going to split too, and then you're like, oh, now I got to deal with that.
Exactly.
So, but is it possible? Yes. Do we do it?
No.
Probably not.
No, but
it's not. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not our thing.
I would say test it out, and I would recommend doing carbon when you have both of them in there. That will probably give you a better chance of success.
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Max Wong, voice actor.
I want to hear this voice acting.
Have you ever tested the wastewater from RODI system? I personally haven't, but I think we've done that. Has somebody done that here? I feel like that was a thing that we did.
I don't recall. But your wastewater is going to have the same things that your regular tap water is going to have, just in much higher concentrations.
Yep.
And without chlorine or chloramine, assuming that your carbon blocks are still working.
Correct.
So it's not going to be a huge drop in TDS with those or with the wastewater, because that wastewater is what gets flushed past the RO membrane, so it's not actually being filtered at all once it gets past the carbon block. It's just going to be a little bit more concentrated because it is the wastewater that has all the rejected chemicals that don't go through the membrane. So,
But I mean, if you do test, you should see that higher concentration, right?
Yeah.
If you're not seeing that higher concentration in that wastewater, then something's wrong with your RODI system, right?
Yeah. So not a whole lot's going to be exciting in there. As long as you know your source water levels, it's going to be that, but a little bit more concentrated.
Edgar Martinez, or Martinez, sorry. What are the best bacteria to cycle in an aquarium? I don't know the specific genus and species, but if you're asking the different bottled methods, is probably what I'm assuming you're gonna, for me, I mean, you'll never beat natural live rock and the bacterial colonies that come with that. But if you're adding to a tank, you've got a lot of different options out there.
I mean, I think they're all pretty good. I've had good success with any bottled bacteria I've used for the purposes of cycling. So Dr. Tim's, Microbacter Start.
Yep.
I've used Protobio, all these other different brands. can't really go wrong with them. They all cycle the tank within a couple weeks.
Yeah, I've had great luck with the Brightwell Aquatic stuff. I think they do a good job. But then again, like I said, if you can get your hands on just like even just a little piece of live rock or the bio media, like a bio block, or even the clay bio balls, right? You just get 1 or 2 of those from maybe somebody that's got a nice established tank. Just drop that in your sump or in your tank for a week or 2, and that'll have all the bacteria you need right there. So,
yeah. Looks like Dr. Fresh is tuning in.
Dr. Fresh.
Flying over Nebraska right now. He thinks refugiums are super cool. Are they a crazy idea for a new reefer or possible for beginners?
So yeah, so first off, refugiums are super cool, and I've seen some refugiums set up almost to the level of display tank. Like you're like, I would put this on a shelf somewhere and look at it all the time.
Forget the reef.
Yeah, forget the reef. Yeah, and we actually had this conversation with somebody earlier that just that those natural like light colors and the greens and things, they're a little more soothing to the eye actually. So, and I think it's like working in like a cubicle under a bunch of fluorescent lights versus working like outside.
Yeah.
You're some natural lighting, right? It's the same concept. But I love the natural look, and we've been talking about it a little bit around here, and I am like this close to setting up a macro algae like softy tank at home just to have it, just because.
You're going to have 20 tanks by the time.
Oh my God, I know, it's getting bad.
Hoarding.
So, yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So hoarding water. You can do it. They're super easy. They're not a crazy idea for a new reefer. They're super possible for beginners. There's really not a lot to it. There is sometimes a bit of a learning curve with caring for and maintaining like Chaeto, but Chaetomorpha or whatever. But that's also not the only option out there. Chaetomorpha. There's also some other macroalgae that are really beautiful and can look great in a refugium. And still serve that purpose, and double over as food for your tangs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just personally would not recommend using Ulva. I thought it was a great idea because it grew super fast as a refugium algae.
Yeah.
Terrible idea. It got all over my tank.
Yeah, it'll do that. Yeah.
I'm like, aren't my tanks supposed to like this stuff? They did not like it enough.
They didn't. Your tangs didn't eat the Ulva?
No, they did not.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I was a little.
Usually they.
I was like, this is worse than
I've never seen a tang not eat Ulva. That's wild. So you had some picky tangs. But yeah, so there are other things you could do. Yeah, I mean. People I think downplay them, but there's some beautiful Caulerpas, Octhodes, all kinds of stuff out there that are just really, really nice, and you can use those in refugium. But no, definitely not just for the advanced folks. I would recommend. I have them on all my tanks. If I have space for refugium, I have a refugium.
Yeah, so. They're great.
All right, Trippy or Tripey, I don't know, Trippy Miggy. Love it. Will a cleanup crew help with diatoms? Huge fan. Thank you. Oh, I see what you did there.
That's a good
unless somebody just typoed it. It's, I'm assuming they didn't, so nice job. Yes, the cleanup crew will help with diatoms, especially pods.
Couple pods. All your snails are going to eat diatoms pretty readily for the most part. So diatoms are one of the great algae to have because they're or not even an algae technically, but
true.
Easy to deal with a cleanup crew in my experience.
Microorganisms. Yeah, and
super good
because they're just everything will eat it. So it's great. So your cleanup crew will definitely help with them. There you go. Easy answer. Okay, we're humming right along here, guys. If you again answering questions, open Q&A, got any? Send them in. We'll fire through them. Chris Van. How likely is it that I can fully reverse head and lateral line erosion in a juvenile blue tang? I received one with minor head and lateral HLLE. I'll just say that, head and lateral line erosion is what that means. From an online retailer, they replaced it for free, but the second one also came in with, so yes, you can. I've personally done this, right? So years ago, one of my first big boy purchases in my tank was a purple tang that I saw at a Petco.
Hey, hard to resist. Good price, right?
It was like $70.
Can't pass that up. Yeah. Can't pass it up.
And he was several inches across. I was like, and look at him. But yeah, he had full on head and lateral line erosion. He looked like he was half eaten. Got him. I had that fish for like 10 years before I had a fish store hold on to him for me while I moved my tank, and then they sold him. Wow.
Sorry.
I was quite angry. So, but yeah, beautiful fish, and he did. Within about 6 months, he was almost completely clear. So it really just depends on your tank, the level of stress that he has. That just happened to be a tank I was running on an algae turf scrubber at the time. So, but I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But yeah, you can reverse it. It's just all about proper nutrition, reducing stress, all that.
Yeah, I was going to say nutrition is the solution in my experience with this particular issue in fish, especially with tanks. It's most common on, but make sure they got plenty of nori, plenty of other solid food options throughout the day.
Yep, varied diet. I was big in mysis. I did, at the time, I think it was Ocean Nutrition, like flakes.
Yeah.
Then I would feed nori as well. So, but just a varied diet, plenty of different types of nutrition, and just, again, low stress levels. Because, you know, if he's stressed out, he's not going to want to eat right. So don't have a bunch of other tanks if you're adding to a new tank or something like that. But yeah, there you go.
I want to go down to Arbor Press because I think they asked this last week. We just didn't get to it. Can NPS corals and sponges be successfully kept in a tank with acropora?
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to create the right environment for them, right? So you're building an artificial reef anyway, so you just have to make sure you account for that. I actually, I kind of had this idea for this sort of rock tunnel structure at one point in time for a tank, and having NPS corals and stuff down inside of there. And so yeah, you can. You just have to give them the right environment. And some NPS corals can be out in full light. They don't care. Gorgonians, things like that. They'll be fine out there in the same light that your acros are in. Okay, eating the same stuff that you're feeding your acros. Some of them, like sea fans, require the same flow, so all good there. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at something like the sun corals, things like tubastrias, then yeah, you want to give them a nice dark spot to hang out. But
yeah, I was going to say, just generally, if you give them lower light, they're more likely to have their polyps out, so easier to feed that way. And you'll just have to plan on feeding for the NPS corals and sponges to keep them alive, because they're not going to use the light that you're giving your acros.
That's right. So, yeah, if you're not feeding your acros currently, you're just relying on sort of what's in the water or just photosynthesis to take care of that, you're going to have to start feeding something, or you're going to lose them.
Yeah, so you have to plan on feeding your corals. That's the only stipulation. And generally, just giving them a darker place in the tank will help them be open during the day when you're looking at the tank rather than just at night.
Yep. Now, when it comes to sponges, a lot of the big decorative sponges, they're just hard to keep. They really are. I mean, it's hard to keep up with their consumption.
They eat a lot. They filter a lot.
That's all they're doing, is constantly eating, right? So it's really hard to keep up on that. Now, there are a lot of small sponges, especially if you have live rock direct from the ocean or something like that. You'll find there's sponges all over this tank has a bunch of sponges all over it. So it used to be one of my favorite things. You'd see these little blue encrusting sponges and stuff growing in your rocks. So yeah, I mean, they're fine. They'll live as long as they've got what they need, and usually that revolves around food nutrition. So okay,
good question.
Great question. Jerry Pileman, going back up to you. Thanks again for another question. It's great. What's the longest anybody stayed up setting up their tank? I did about 36 hours making water, building an aquascape, and plumbing. Took a little nap after 24 hours. Hey man, that's dedication.
That is dedication.
I don't know. We'll have to poll the audience here. What's the longest you've ever done the grind there to get your tank set up? I usually have had to take breaks. I've put in full days before moving a tank. It's miserable.
Oh, you never want to go back to that.
Nope. You get at the end of the day, you're going, why do I even do this hobby? I don't understand. Why am I here? So it can be miserable. So yeah, I get it. But way to be a trooper there, bud. All right.
Yeah. I was gonna say my very first tank setup was that whole tank teardown with the multiple anemones that I had. That tank, my dad and I were up for 20 hours between getting up to go pick up the tank, take it down at that guy's house, get it back to my place, set it back up. That was started. I woke up at 6 a.m. We weren't done until like 11 p.m. and that was a long, long day.
Yeah, smaller tanks are easier, but none of them are easy. Full stop.
Yeah.
So
looks like we got time for like one more question. I think.
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. So I like here, glaucoma. I see you're back. We had. I know you've been on some of the Q&As before. Thanks for jumping on. So I want to get a fifth fish for my 20-gallon mixed reef. Currently, it houses a pair of clowns, Bangai, I assume one Bangai, and a purple firefish. Or should I not add any more fish? I have nitrates at 5 to 10, phosphates at 0.03. I mean, really, it's up to you. And we talked earlier, there are a lot of, all your fish, here's the thing, all your fish are sort of open water fish. So that's kind of nice, right? They're above and around the rockwork. But there are so many options of fish that like to be down in it and around it. Gobies are great. Get something to clean up the sand. Again, you just can't beat a goby shrimp combo,
Hard to
honestly. There's some great little, basslets, wrasses, 6-line possum, there are lots of little fish that you could add to that just don't have a big footprint, and they'd be perfectly fine. In fact, in some cases, they might even help. Like you get some sand sifting goby of some kind, in there.
Tailspot blenny.
Tailspot
That's
blenny.
what I would go for.
Tailspot blennies, they're great.
You're gonna love them.
Yeah, there's a few of the blennies, and some of them, even some of the bigger ones would be like starry blennies and things like that. They're beautiful. They really are. So, but yeah, some blennies are great. I think I had a bicolor blenny once, and that fish probably had more personality than any other fish I ever had, right? They were just the goofiest things.
They look at you funny.
I
love them.
They kind of back into little holes in the rock and stare out. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. So, lots of options out there, but look for something that's kind of small, doesn't really take up a lot of space, and
not super aggressive.
Yeah, I'd look for something that doesn't hang out in the water column a lot. Something going to get down in the rocks or around in the sand.
Yeah.
Is that all we got time for?
I think so.
Is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look, guys, hey, there's a few questions on here. We'll make sure we keep those, and we'll try to answer those next time we do a Q&A. But for now, I think we're going to sign off. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again. Can't wait to see you at the next one, and take care, guys.
Bye.